Hello and welcome to the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. We bring you interviews from people who have conquered the trickiest of health challenges using the functional diagnostic nutrition philosophy and similar healing modalities. You're going to hear from experts who have been through the ringer with their health issues and yet managed to come out on the other side. You can always visit us at functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com, but for now, here is today's episode. All right. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transu, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your host for today's show. If you have not heard the news yet, these will be some of my final podcasts with FDN. Unfortunately, I will be moving on here pretty soon. We are not necessarily sure what's going to come of the podcast, but considering this is episode number 477, it does not look like we're going to be trying to get rid of it by any means. We just have some things to figure out in the background. So I am very, very happy to be here, particularly happy. And we're going to be nerding out today, just like we always do. Really cool topic. One thing that I remember from pretty much day one of the podcast is very ignorantly worrying about, am I going to be able to find new topics to talk about for 100 episodes? That's literally what I thought. I'm like, maybe we'd hit all the health conditions. And if you had asked me at the time, Ev, are there more than 100 health conditions? Of course I would have said yes. It's just, I didn't think about it back then, what a podcast would look like. So 477 episodes in, and today we will be bringing a topic that we've somehow never discussed on the show. I might actually even butcher one of the words here, but hopefully that's some of my appeal as a host is I'm not rocking some, 170 IQ or anything like that. I have just as many questions as you guys for our expert guests. So I'm looking forward to talking about that today. One quick thing to shout out before we move along here, FDNtraining.com/HSU. I'd like you to go there, please. That's for our Health Space Unmasked event, which is the first Saturday of each month. I believe I will be hosting this last one. I should be into that one. And that'll be February 7th, Saturday, February 7th, my dad's birthday as well. And we're going to be talking to Dr. Habib. He was on recently on the podcast a few weeks back. He talked about the vagus nerve. He's the author of 2 different books on the vagus nerve, and he's going to be giving us a whole presentation on that Saturday with a long Q&A. So if you don't know what HSU is, it's not that we not only that we do it once every month on the first Saturday, but it's almost like a mini conference. So instead of hearing from 10 speakers and you got to sign up and you got to pay, it's always free. The replays are always free. You get to ask 45 minutes of questions to the guest. And I promise there's always 45 minutes worth of questions because the topics that we bring are fantastic. And on top of that, you just get to chill in your pajamas and watch virtually. So it's an hour and a half, 2 hours out of your Saturday. You get to nerd out, learn, feel a lot smarter, and then go enjoy the rest of your weekend. So that's FDNtraining.com/HSU. Again, I can't promise whether or not I'll be hosting that one. I'm not 100% sure yet, but if I am, it'll be the last one of HSU. So hope to see you guys there. Now, today, I've complained many times, many times about my setup here that I took so much pride in building. And when I say building, I mean hiring someone else to teach me how to build it because I had no idea how to do this. This is above my pay grade. And then constantly little things are off. Yesterday, I had an issue with my light. Today, I'm having an issue with my teleprompter. So if it looks like I'm staring at you, the way I'm able to do this is because I actually have a teleprompter up with the camera in the back. But unfortunately, camera's good, but the teleprompter is not. So I'm going to redirect myself here for just a moment. And if we go to the comments and questions, I'm going to need to do that as well so that I can read our lovely guest's bio and see if I get the word right of one of the topics we'll be discussing today. Ariana Juarez is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and founder of Alura Wellness, specializing in, here's my key word, is it melasma reversal?
Melasma, yeah.
Melasma reversal and metabolic skin health. Using functional lab testing, she helps clients uncover the internal drivers behind chronic hyperpigmentation and accelerated aging so they can achieve true, lasting healing from the inside out. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
It is a privilege to have you as one of my final people I get to host here on this show. So let's get right into this. I do ask a similar question every time we get on this show. If you've gotten to listen before, or chose to listen before, rather, you might have heard it. So the first question I will ask, whether it's relevant perfectly to this or not, is a different story. But we will get into this first before we get into today's topic. I'd like to know about you. I'd like to know about when your health symptoms began, if you had any, and what did they look like? Because very few people get into this space, let alone become an FDN, without a pretty clear story or a reason behind that.
Absolutely. So my entrance into my healing journey was getting this condition, melasma. I developed that condition in 2008. And even though from how it started to how it ended was a very, very different trajectory. It was not just one thing that was causing the pigmentation in my skin. It started out as having taken birth control for a very short period of time, which is very common. And then there I tried to treat the condition, lifestyle stuff, didn't have any success there. And then a couple years later, 2012, I had a couple stressful incidents in my life that broke my HPA axis. 3 specific incidences that sent me into a chronic state of cell release. I had insomnia. I had panic attacks, which I had never had before. And then from there, started to get worse. And I took the path that every person with melasma has. You go to the dermatologist, right? You're trying to figure out, I'm not how the stress in my life or what I'm doing in my life is connected to my skin necessarily at that point. But it was very clear that the stress had progressed the condition to getting worse. So then I started seeing dermatologists, to which, they give everyone with melasma the same answer. You're going to have this forever. This is just something that you manage. Just wear sunscreen. Well, it could be genetic for you. There is a hormonal component, but we don't know what that is. But this is just something you're going to have to live with. And I just wasn't really willing to accept that as my end game. I was like, I wasn't born with this. I'm not dying with this. Doesn't matter what you tell me. I will figure this out. And so that's kind of what started my journey into functional healing.
Awesome. Well, I think that's so even though the health conditions are so different, the experiences are so different. One core theme after almost 500 episodes has always been this: there's a lack of acceptance, and I think a good one, by the way. Right? Like, I'm just not accepting this narrative, especially when anything comes to skin. I think most of us are highly motivated. You probably know part of my story with the cystic acne and stuff. You'll do anything to figure out something that's going on with your skin because you want to look good, right? Or as best as you can. So what is interesting to me, though, and one follow-up I'd like to do real quick, is just because you don't have an acceptance, which again is good, of the idea or the conclusion that was being told to you, that's not necessarily a ticket into functional medicine. That might have just meant you went to a different doctor, tried a different cream, or who knows what. So I am curious, how long did it take to bridge from, hey, I'm not accepting what you're telling me here, I'm going to figure this out, to realizing that maybe this whole world of functional healthcare might be a part of your journey?
Yeah. So after trying lasers and topicals and not having any progress, at that time I became I've always been into health since I was pretty young. Even when I developed melasma, I had a really good diet. I always ate organic. I always was very healthy in my lifestyle. I became really into like the biohacking space. And so I became obsessive with health podcasts. I listened to every bulletproof, podcast you could imagine when it first started. I even went to the Bulletproof conference back in 2014. I was like talking to people about health. So when I was told that, you're going to have this forever, I had to decide for myself that I needed to figure out what's causing the pigmentation. So I started researching all of the chemical reactions in the body, all the hormones, all the things that aggravate or turn that mechanism on. So every single hormone, every single mechanism, every single thing I had to piece together myself from reading, like, okay, what does the adrenal glands do? What are the hormones that come from these organs and how do they interact with each other? What is the biochemical process between these mechanisms that stimulates the melanocyte to make pigment? Like I got really down to the function of the body. And when I started telling people like, hey, I'm learning this, like cortisol plays a major role. It shares a pathway with the production of pigmentation itself. So it makes sense why I had those stressful experiences that my melasma spread and got worse. Even though that wasn't the catalyst for its beginning, the catalyst for the beginning was estrogen because I had taken that birth control, which is really common for women. Most women get it from pregnancy, birth control use. It's perimenopause, menopause. And there's a lot of different reasons, different variables as to why women get it during those different times because your hormones are so different during those experiences. So I had to really put everything together. And once I started doing that, I started realizing that, functional medicine was the only thing that kind of recognized conditions that were not really recognized, like PCOS. You only saw functional doctors talking about PCOS when that was first coming to light. So it only made sense to try to go in that direction. And I worked with several functional medicine doctors throughout my journey. I worked with two, one for longer than the other. And that journey was actually really challenging, even though the functional practitioners or the functional doctors I worked with had already reversed this condition with other clients. They were really confident they could fix my skin. But when I started doing functional testing, I got worse and worse and worse. And it got to a point where, my functional doctor was like, hey, I don't want to scare you, but, you have cancer levels of estrogen in your body. And for me, that was like, I was kind of getting to the end of my road. This was like, I'm 7 years into treating myself. And to hear something like that was really hard. It was like, oh no, like, but I have to keep going. It was just really pushing me to keep going. And then, once I started doing a lot of detoxification, my skin spread overnight. And a lot of people will say, oh, melasma is a, liver issue. Well, I mean, it's not a liver issue, but it's a metabolic detoxification issue on how you're metabolizing certain hormones, how your body is processing things. And so when I started doing heavy liver support, I got worse and worse and worse. And my doctor said to me, my functional doctor said to me, I don't want this to upset you, but I'm getting to the end of my abilities with you. You have been my hardest client. I've never seen these kinds of estrogen levels. I've never had this experience where the pigmentation won't go away, and I don't want to give up on you, but I'm getting to the end of my road with knowing what to do for you.
That's what you want to hear from your doc.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, we ended our relationship because she had gotten in an accident and was no longer able to practice. So she didn't give up on me at the end of the day. So that's good. But I had to keep going on my own. So I had to teach myself how to read my own labs. I didn't have any guidance. I didn't even know about FDN at the time. I wish I did because it would have really helped. So I had to learn how to read a lot of the labs on my own. I had to make a lot of my own connections. I had to come to my own conclusions. And at the end of the day, when we quit seeing each other, the final test that we did was a heavy metal test. And she was like, this is the most heavy metals I've ever seen in a client, ever. And I was thinking to myself, wow, okay, massive heavy metal load. And then I'm thinking estrogen load, super high estrogen load. Nobody was making this connection at the time. But for me, it was an estrogen problem, but it was also heavy metals can act like estrogen in the body. They can absolutely they're called metallohormones. So metalloestrogens, they bind to the estrogen receptor, which for me was like, okay, I somehow have this high heavy metal load from, I don't even know what to this day. But once I was able to really kind of have that as a piece of the component and take that and relay it back to everything else that had happened in the trajectory of my life, I was able to finally get my skin to start clearing. But of course, I had to do a ton of gut stuff, a ton of gut healing, a ton of hormone balancing. And all of these things together are kind of what started moving the needle for me. And I think that's why women get so frustrated with melasma specifically, because melasma is it's stubborn of all chronic skin conditions because it's multifactorial. There's never going to be one thing, or if there is one thing, it's really, really rare. For most people, when you first get it, it could be just one thing. As you see, if you leave it untreated, it can develop into so many other things that are kind of activating that melanocyte. These things reinforce each other. Histamine in the gut can reinforce pigment release, mast cell activation. All of these things are feedback loops into each other. And I think that's, everybody just wants that one, what's the root cause? And one thing I appreciate about taking the FDN course was when Reed said, you're going to be one root cause. And I think a lot of people miss that. Like even your most experienced practitioners treat everything in isolation, when really these things are feedback loops. Your estrogen and cortisol, they're a feedback loop. Your hormones, your thyroid hormone and your digestive health, all of your hormones and your digestive health are feedback loops. Your digestion is your master regulator of your hormones. And people forget that you can't just treat one thing. You can't just treat your estrogen. You have to treat the whole system, the whole ecosystem to get the results that you want.
I love that you brought up the root cause thing. I know it's not the only thing that you just brought up, but thank you for finishing with that, because I've been in FDN now for almost 9 years. And it's one of those things that actually I get it a little bit more each year. Because you're right, there's experienced practitioners. I love our FDNs, but including some FDNs that still kind of get into that kind of allopathic model of addressing things. But when you look at these conditions through that lens of metabolic chaos that we talk about in the FDN course, and then you understand that even if XYZ thing was the main contributor to your metabolic chaos 10 years ago, it's now all this other stuff. Right? There's so many other things that are there. Like, to the best of my ability, and this is a pure guess, Ariana, like my mom and I do believe that a genetic gluten sensitivity is probably one of the main core things that caused a lot of our issues. But here's the problem. By the time we did testing, we had been on countless courses of antibiotics. She's got metal in her mouth. We have gut bugs like H. pylori and Blastocystis hominis. We have other food sensitivities, heavy metals, HPA axis dysfunction. So it's beyond even the fact or the idea of like, could it be one root cause or not? It's like, it doesn't even matter at this point, right? Who knows? Because there's so many other things that are happening. And I think this is very similar or a very similar line of thinking and reasoning behind why so many conditions like the one that you're talking about today get listed off as, oh, there's no cure or no resolution. It's because if you are taking that allopathic model approach, we're never going to find it. We're never going to find that one thing, because it was all these things that were contributing to what you were dealing with here. So when did this evolve into FDN and going through the program? And what I would also like to know, if I can ask kind of two questions at once, I'm infamous for that. But when you did find FDN and when it led there, were you already in a better place with your health and you were just passionate and wanted to take this? Or did you still have some work to do while going through the FDN course, especially like in terms of the skin stuff, not just general health stuff, but the skin specifically?
Yeah. So when I came to FDN, I was pretty much cleared my melasma. I was pretty much at the end of the road for that. But that was fine because it was a good follow-up to where I was at with my health going forward. But I came to FDN because I really wanted to help other women. I mean, melasma is a condition that so many women become depressed from. I mean, you look at yourself in the mirror every day and you feel like you don't recognize yourself. You can probably relate to that to some degree. I feel like with cystic acne gets so much more attention in the world and melasma doesn't. It's all you have as doctors and dermatologists telling you, you're going to have this forever. the rest of your life. Even heard some biohackers on a podcast the other day say melasma is forever. And I'm just sitting there
Wow.
thinking like, no, it's not. Like, we need to change this narrative that it is, And so there's not that many people talking about this condition, and the condition itself has some pretty, there's some pretty serious implications if you really look at estrogen dominance. Like, having a doctor tell me that, I have cancer levels of estrogen, like, that was my only sign to knowing that my health was going down a very, very wrong road. But I knew it. I saw it every day looking at me like, something is wrong with your health. Something is really deeply wrong. That's what it was to me. And when you have people telling you every day that it's nothing's wrong, or that it's nothing, it's a nothing burger, like, I am hoping to change the narrative around that, and wanted to be able to have the labs, the credentials, and the resource, the community to work with, of changing the narrative and moving into. Dermatology is very stubborn with this, and so I came to FDN to feel like I belong somewhere, very much like I was an many health journey, telling dermatologists, telling people about melasma. And yeah, so I came to FDN for that, and to support, to know that they can heal.
I'm excited to see what you do, because especially if you're challenging a narrative, even in like that might be held by some biohackers and stuff. That's fun, man. That makes for great podcasts, great content on social, and you're telling the truth, right? It's not like we're doing anything disingenuous. It's just it's naturally provocative in a certain way and controversial. So I'm excited to see what you continue to do. So let's do this then. For someone that clicked on this today and they're like, well, what can I do? Like, we've talked about some testing. I don't really understand that. I always take the perspective of perhaps someone's listening today, especially with how I titled this, that has no idea what an FDN even is. They're like, what the heck are these guys talking about? So with that all said, if I am listening today, I'm dealing with this condition right now, and I get to go into your brain knowing all the things that you know today, where are some of the first places that you would start if I was your client dealing with this condition?
Well, the very first place you have to start is by cleaning up your diet, because if you have melasma, you also have a high oxidative stress load. And the best way for you to get that oxidative stress down is by getting your antioxidants up. And I mean, it's a little redundant to say, because I feel like a lot of people in the melasma space talk a lot about diet. First place you have to start. From there, the most important thing for me, what I do with my clients, is always run a Dutch test. I want to see what all your hormones are doing. I want to see what testosterone's doing, estrogen, progesterone, and I want to see what your androgens are doing, because androgens also can play a role in pigmentation, testosterone, the conversion into estrogen. All of these things play a major role on your inflammatory load and what your hormones are doing. And then I always suggest people to run a GI map or a gut zoomer lab. It's really, really important to understand what bacteria is going on inside of your stomach, what your immune system is like inside of your stomach, because there is an immune, there's definitely an immune component to melasma, because melasma can be very vascular. That's a role with your immune system. So always looking at the gut, looking at the immune system, and of course, looking at your toxin detoxification pathways, like how well are those working, and working with that kind of, starting with those. And then I do often like to look at certain nutrients, like copper overload can play a role. Iron overload can also play a role, and also being deficient in certain nutrients like B vitamins, vitamin D. These things are all really important for your skin health overall. So those are kind of the labs that I usually start with melasma clients.
I want to. I know I don't want to go off track because I want to talk about the labs a little bit more. But I have one quick question, because you said diet's something that actually is talked about in the melasma space, and I'm curious because if someone Like, what is the reason for that? Because if someone does not believe that they can impact this thing, or maybe they believe that they can impact it, just not reverse it. Maybe that's the belief that I'm missing. I'm wondering why diet gets brought up at all, though, if this narrative, it seems like, is that there's nothing that you can do about this, or you're kind of doomed to deal with this. So what am I missing there? That diet would still be a part of the melasma conversation, but yet simultaneously people are apparently saying, hey, you can't really get rid of this. What am I missing with that?
Yeah, so I think there's been a couple people who were able to like reverse their melasma from
Okay.
a very, very strict diet. And two notable people that I know in this in the atmosphere here for melasma specifically, excuse me. So they focus a lot on diet, but diet may move the needle for some people, but likely it's not gonna move the needle for most. So that's why I think there's just
Okay.
been people who hyper focused on their diet and lifestyle, and over the course of 7 years were able to find clarity and getting most of their melasma cleared.
Sure.
But,
Oh,
melasma can be really complex for some people, like if you're dealing with mast cell activation, like if you have mast cell activation, you have a load of other problems going on with your health. And there's a lot of working pieces to some cases.
mhm.
Even though there's definitely overlap between cases. Like I would say that like, the toxic burden is probably an overlap in most cases where it's just across the board, something that everybody likely has. But it can just vary so dramatically. But I think diet is like really important. Doesn't matter how intense it is or how mild your melasma is. It's definitely the first step.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. That makes a lot more sense now. I would also say there's so many overlaps here between this and the acne space, believe it or not. And I wouldn't even be surprised to find that it's similar in the psoriasis space, eczema, all that stuff. So what I mean is you'll see all these forums online. These forums were like some of the first, I swear, that existed on the internet were acne forums, where people are talking about, oh, just remove dairy, man. Just remove
Oh,
dairy. That cures acne, right? And
yeah.
you know what? In fact, for some people, for whatever variety of reasons, they remove dairy and their skin clears up. And so, of course, they're going to share that. They mean well. They're not selling you anything. They're literally telling you something that you could do for free. The next person, it's chocolate. The next person, it's gluten. The next person, it's meat. The next person, it's grains. And so, I was in a conceptually similar place in that I was trying the vegan thing. I did vegetarian. I did paleo. To say I didn't see improvements from those things is not correct. I did, but I never found that resolution that was being promoted to me online. And in fact, I do things now that are like the opposite sometimes of what I thought worked. I'm not promoting this for any one person. I'm saying this works for me. As someone who's very active and needs a lot of calories, I drink almost like a quarter to half gallon of the A2 milk every single day. I feel fine. I'm in the best health I've ever been in. But at one point, I believed that was the main thing causing my cystic acne because that's what was promoted online. And yet, for me, it's a total superfood that works very well for my body, oddly enough. But it was all these other things that I was never able to identify until I got the lab tests. That's why some things would seem like they worked, some things seemed like they didn't. It's like, well, I was never really getting to the bottom line of these various root causes, if you will, maybe for lack of a better word, even that was contributing to my metabolic chaos. So, going back to the lab thing, then specifically, what I find interesting to ask sometimes if a person has a niche or a very tight niche, like you're working with a very tight variety or a specific set of clients. So I'd be curious on your labs that you're running, like your core labs for these individuals, are there certain patterns that you're noticing or things or markers that you're seeing overrepresented amongst that population? And this is not always the case, but a lot of the times it is. So I just like to know if are there things that you see with these clients that you're like, yeah, like 70% of the time, this marker is high on this test, or I'm seeing this here. I'm just curious if you're starting to notice anything like that.
Yeah, so a lot of the time it's going to be estrogen dominance is going to
Sure.
be one of the primary drivers of melasma. It's not all the only primary driver. I've written extensively about this topic on my website, really have deep dived on every possible avenue of pigmentation stimulation. But estrogen dominance plays a big role. But a lot of people don't consider that your estrogen dominance role is also kind of what your xenoestrogen load is doing. So your toxin load does kind of contribute to that estrogen load. So estrogen and toxin load play a major role. And I think everybody across the board seems to have some digestive issues, like I've seen clients, clear their melasma, or their melasma start breaking up from healing their candida. Sounds very random, right? Most people aren't thinking like, oh, my candida is causing my melasma, but candida, H. pylori, all of these things create histamine in the body. They overstimulate the mast cell, your immune system. So these things are feedback loops for pigmentation. They aggravate pigmentation in the melanocyte. So, gut issues are a major, major thing. And then just not having the cleanest terrain. Your, terrain is just congested. It's not just your inability to get rid of toxins, but, the pathway through by which that happens. So what's going on with methylation, what's going on with phase 1, phase 2, what's going on with your digestion. So all of that all plays a major role in most cases.
Okay. In terms of the stress side of things, because you had mentioned this in the very beginning of the podcast, how there was some stressful events that went on. It's so easy, even if people don't always accept this, once they do get into this idea that stress can contribute to disease, it's almost easy to say like, oh, well, I've had all these things in my life, and that's why I'm in this disease state. And then it allows them, unfortunately, to underplay the dietary side, to underplay some of the other lifestyle factors. I'm a middleman. Sounds like you are a middle woman with this, where it's not that it's one or the other. It's that these are all contributing factors. When you think about it, under this umbrella of metabolic chaos, you start to realize, yes, man, the gluten, the candida, and the trauma could all be contributing to this, perhaps even equally. So I'd like to know, even if you're not, I'm assuming you're not a psychologist that's necessarily qualified to give specific advice like that, but I am curious, where does the role of stress reduction play for your clients? Are you finding that most of them have also had a series of kind of serious events in their life, or was that more unique to your case? And if it is the former, then what do you recommend for those types of individuals so that they're addressing that while going through the lab stuff with you?
Yeah, so the stress component, it kind of just varies. I wouldn't necessarily say that every person had a really traumatic incident that occurred. Yes, it definitely can be the case. I'd say stress is also like a major player in the game for pigmentation, because everybody is always stressed out. Not a lot of people know how to regulate their stress. So finding what works for you, because everyone is so different and there's so many different ways to mitigate stress. For me, it was meditation. So I've been practicing, Tibetan meditation style for over 10 years,
Cool.
Religiously practicing, not religious, but, every day. But not everybody can do that. I have people ask me, oh, can you teach me meditation? But it's just, I'm like, you have to find what works for you, and the type of meditation I do may not necessarily work for you, because there's so many different ways to mitigate stress. I like to tell people, start off simple. If you want to mitigate stress, go for a walk. Just go for a walk. Just take 15 minutes, 20 minutes out of your day and just go for a walk. Put on some music, put on an audiobook and just walk, or or just listen to nature. Even you don't need to be inputting something all the time. You just be with yourself, be with your thoughts, just be in that walk, because not everyone's going to want to meditate. If prayer is your thing, do that. If if working out is your thing and that's your way of like getting into a flow state, a meditative state, then do that. I think that for stress, it's tricky because everybody, I have some other tools and things if people want to explore different modalities of stress, building stress resilience. There's neurofeedback. It depends on what kind, if you have trauma. So if you have trauma, I'll usually suggest maybe check out some neurofeedback. Like that's a good way to kind of retrain the stress mechanisms in the brain. But stress plays a big role, and I think it's up to I usually just try to guide my clients to what kind of things are you interested in? What makes you feel calm? Because I can't tell everyone to go and meditate as much as I would love to. It's just not something that I think everybody is open to doing. But yeah, finding what makes you feel calm because we're so different, right? We're all so different. We have different things that calm us down. We have different ways of just dealing and coping with things. And so I just try to guide people into finding what works for them when it
Makes
comes to.
sense to me. I think that's fair. If you guys have, I see a good amount of you on. If you have any quick questions about this condition for our guest today, please drop them in the chat now. I'd love to get those answered for you guys. My next follow-up question, and this is for everyone, but I know my ladies out there are definitely thinking this in their head. So products, right? I have no idea if you believe products are helpful for this condition, if there's certain product lines that you recommend, because some can be way harsher than others. I've gotten to a point with the acne thing, and everyone gets really mad at me. Even the dudes get mad at me when I say this, but I'm not someone who uses anything other than like a moisturizer on my skin. Now, by the way, I have large pores. I still have some scarring from stuff. I don't have acne though. That was my main thing that I was setting out to do. So I'm not saying products don't work. I'm not saying that I couldn't be prettier if I did those things, but I find it amazing that the only things that were recommended for myself when I was dealing with acne were these products. And yet the exact way that I healed is by not using them at all. With that said, though, we are not terrible people, and we probably want people to feel as good as they can and look as good as they can while they address the deeper stuff that's contributing to these conditions. So I'm curious, are there any products that you know of or have experienced that can help this condition, even if it's just like a temporary type of thing? It just kind of helps it look a little better, like outside of makeup, obviously. I don't even know if that really works for this. And what would those products be if that exists, or if it doesn't, we can just skip over it.
Yeah, well, it's a great question actually, because I get that question a lot. So on my health journey, I never used topicals. And I did that for one specific reason. And it was because I wanted the results. I wanted to see my results from internal treatment. I'm probably the only person out there that did something like this, internal treatment, but did not use a single topical. And
I got you. I was
yeah,
just
and
thinking
for
the same thing.
you.
I've never once heard someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but like that is cool though.
Yeah, and I did it for, I did it for the team, take one for the team. That was my do it for the team. But I do, there are ways to do topicals with internal treatment so that you can get faster results. And in terms, everybody reacts differently to certain topicals. So I do have a list of topicals that I go over with my clients that, we kind of talk about their skin sensitivity, because, your skin is very different. But I would say across the board, vitamin C is great. Some people can't even tolerate that though. So the tricky thing is with melasma is because it's an inflammatory skin condition, it's triggered by heat and by sauna or working out, it will spread or darken or get worse. So it's a highly inflammatory condition. And so some topicals for some women just don't even work. If you're using glycolic acid or any kind of strong acids, that will make it worse for some people. So it really just depends on how sensitive the person is, how active your melasma is, because melasma, from my experience with it, it has an active phase and a passive phase. So passive phase meaning it's not getting worse. You can go out in the sun. It's not going to get worse, but you just have it. It's there. It's not necessarily migrating or darkening or spreading. But the active phase of melasma, your melasma is darkening and spreading in response to UV exposure. This is kind of why dermatologists say that it's caused by the sun, even though the sun isn't the cause of melasma, because if it was, we would see more men with melasma and we would see children with melasma. We don't. There's not that many men that get melasma. It's much more rare. We only see women with it. But we also know that women are more sensitive to everything, right? They're more likely to become autoimmune than men are. So yeah, it just depends on their skin, how active their melasma is, how sensitive they are to certain products. And then from there, we can look at what products or topicals would be good for each individual person. Because, just like a supplement, you take a supplement, not everyone reacts the same to a supplement. Same thing goes for topicals with melasma specifically.
Cool. All right, we do have an audience question. Gosh, I got to put my air purifier in. I was coughing up a storm yesterday. I'm glad I can put it on mute. Michelle asked, does pregnancy amplify melasma?
Great question. A lot of women get melasma from pregnancy. It's super common. I went through a whole pregnancy and never had melasma. So that wasn't my trajectory. But yes, pregnancy amplifies melasma because your estrogen is really, really high in your pregnancy. Estrogen is what creates the organs of your fetus. It's one of the main hormones that your body is producing the most of during pregnancy. And so that's why the melanocyte becomes, overactive, because you have a ton of estrogen that you're producing. I'll just piggyback onto this note here that a lot of dermatologists will say, oh, after your pregnancy, your melasma is going to clear. It'll go away. It's fine. In some cases, it does. But in a lot of other cases, it doesn't. And one of the main reasons that it doesn't go away after pregnancy is because when you start breastfeeding, your body is producing a lot of prolactin. Prolactin is what brings your breast milk in. But prolactin also raises cortisol and shares a pathway with cortisol, which shares a pathway with alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone, which is the hormone that produces melanin in the skin. So it can aggravate the pigmentation in the skin. That's why you see women after pregnancy get really stressed out because of that raise in prolactin. And then that's also why the pigmentation doesn't necessarily go away for some women, because then we are dealing with not just estrogen load, but dysregulated cortisol, and then prolactin on top of that. It all becomes a feedback loop. So I felt like that was an important note to add there.
Yeah, thank you. The second, it's almost, I love putting like the pieces of the puzzle together as we do the podcast, because I didn't know the exact answer to that. But the second I even hear that someone's asking that question, and then I'm thinking about the estrogen thing that you mentioned earlier, I'm like, oh, it's got to be, there's something here. I just don't know it yet.
Yeah, it's a feedback loop. It's all a feedback loop.
So I want to word this correctly, because the last thing I ever want to put someone in here is a corner where they're forced to make a claim. I'm not asking for a claim. I'm asking for your personal opinion, which for everyone out there is not medical advice. And I'll even state mine first with certain things. I want to know, based on what you understand now, do you believe if that people, if they had the funds and the tools so they could afford the labs, whatever, if they had the funds and the tools, do you believe that melasma is something that can be reversed in all people? And again, this would not be a claim, because for myself, my personal opinion is that I do believe like cystic acne and really acne in general is something that is not supposed to happen. I do believe that it can be so benign that it's almost insignificant. If like a teenager's getting one or two pimples here or there, I do not think that is necessarily an indicator of severe illness or a major disease about to come their way. That's not what I'm saying either. But I do believe a lot of this is just a result of our modern world. And certainly I would say any form of cystic acne or anything close to the level of cystic acne that I had, I do think it's 100% reversible 100% of the time. That's my belief. So for those out there that are maybe having their paradigm challenged today in a positive way, is your personal belief that this can be probably fixed in 100% of people, assuming that they had the means, or would there be some exceptions to that?
Yes, my personal belief is that yes, it can be reversed in all cases. That being said, I will say that some cases can be very complex, and it can be a very prolonged journey to fix it. It just depends on, getting all of the right things in the right order. Because like I said, it's when you start dealing with mast cell activation and those kind of more complex conditions, immune dysregulation, it can be very challenging. It can take a long time. But I think, if I was able to reverse my skin, this journey started for me in 2008, and I pretty much finally got reversal in 2020.
Wow. Okay.
So that took me that long to put all the pieces together and reverse the condition. And I have had no rebound pigmentation. I go in the sun all the time. I don't have I don't have melasma issues at all. And I'm confident that every woman can live melasma free if they take the journey and decide to heal themselves. But you have to decide. You have to know that that's your path, right?
Yes. Yes. Well, and then a quick follow up to that. And by the way, someone, the same person said incredible information. Thank you so much. So you're welcome. I love bringing these people on. I'm pretty sure they were thanking you, but let me intercept that if I can. So my quick follow up though is I mean, 2008 to 2020 is 12 years. Now, this is one of my favorite quotes of all time. I heard it from Les Brown, a motivational speaker. I'm not sure if he's the original one who said it. But anyway, I heard this at 18. I needed this so much. He said, the time's going to pass anyway. So you might as well pursue your goal. I was like, oh, because sometimes we don't start things because we think it's going to take too long or whatever. He's like, well, the time's going to pass anyway. Like if it's going to take you 5 years to get as jacked as you want to get, right? Well, that's going to pass anyway. So you can start today and start today and get the work done, or you can complain about it. And in 5 years, you'd still have to start from square one anyway. So with that said, knowing what you know now, and I also understand that every case is different, but since you have so much experience, if someone was to work with you, are you suggesting that it could still take 12 years? Or are you just saying, hey, there's going to be some cases where it's a little bit longer than not, but because of what you've learned and the knowledge that you've accumulated, you could probably help someone much faster nowadays? I just want to make sure I understand the message correctly.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I put 12 years of hard work into understanding this condition so that other women don't have to live and suffer with this condition.
Mhm.
I could accelerate somebody's path to healing through my own mistakes and through understanding the mechanisms in the way that I do. If I had known somebody that was my level of understanding of melasma when I had melasma, I would have no doubt had taken the chance to work with them. I mean, I did work with functional medicine doctor who had experience, even though for her it was not something that she could figure out. I want to help people get there faster. Like I think you could even get there with using dermatological interventions as well. I'm not totally opposed to dermatological interventions. I have yet to experiment with lasers and stuff, but I think there's even a time and place for lasers with this condition. That's like a whole other conversation for another time. But yeah, I think we can get there so much faster than 12 years. I would say, even in extreme cases, a year, maybe two. It just depends on how extreme the case is. But I think most cases could be resolved in 3 to 6 months with them having the right understanding of what causes these things to happen, the mechanisms, and then knowing what labs to work with and having the guidance. You'll get it. You'll understand it yourself. You'll know. They
Yeah.
will know. And that's what I want to do. I want to share with you how to get there.
Where can people find you, my friend?
I am mostly on Instagram at alura.wellness. That's the main place I go. But then there's my website, which is alurawellness.com. You can actually read a ton of my melasma articles. I have a deep dive on my blog. So dive into every mechanism. My whole methodology is there. And that's for you to learn.
Awesome. And I know for the signature question, it might seem like I want it just to be about the topic today, but this can be about anything. It's however you interpret it is the right answer. So if we could give you a magic wand and you could wave it and you could get all of our viewers and listeners to do just one thing for their health. Again, it could be about melasma. It could be about completely different topics. Just one thing for their health. If that's one thing, or if there is one thing that you could get them to do, what is the one thing out of all the stuff that you learned that you would get us to start doing or stop doing?
I would say the most important thing you can do for your health, for your longevity, for your future is to get your sleep. Get your sleep routine, get your sleep down to a solid 8 hours, or just having good sleep. I think that was something throughout my healing journey that I didn't take as a major sign of my health, was paying attention to my sleep. But I think diet and sleep are like the two main pillars of your health, two main like markers you can go with, or your period. For women, your menstrual cycle, also a really important vitality marker. But understanding your sleep and what's going on with your sleep is so essential to like living a healthy life.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on today. And thank you for tickling the dopamine receptors in my brain, because the novelty really gets me, especially after so long of doing this. And this was completely new to me, all of this today. So I know it's new for the audience as well, if this is where they get a lot of their health information. So I appreciate you making one of my last podcasts here an excellent one. And I'm
So
looking
glad
forward
we
again
get
to seeing what you continue to do.
Thank you, Evan. I'm so glad I get to talk with you before you go on your own adventure.